All right, shall we get going? It's actually a nice small group of people here, and I've met some of you, and I know some of you. And what I was hoping to do today was to engage us in a kind of a workshop session, and I was going to originally break the group up. But we'll do a lot of it just all of us together. And the aim of this morning is not to give you a presentation, but to engage you in debate. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to ask some good questions, give some good insights, and hopefully we'll be able to teach you a thing or two. Just to give you a bit of a background to myself, my name's Brett Cohen. I work at the University of Sydney in the Department of Chemical Engineering. And a number of people have asked me how you end up being in chemical engineering and doing work in sustainability and decision making. And it's kind of been a progression from working with industrial clients who have realized over the years that they've ended up with various types of environmental issues that they've had to deal with. And they've come to us and asked us, how do you go about making decisions in the face of complexity? Okay, so you're in a situation where we've got to move beyond looking at purely financial indicators, which has been the way people have done things historically, and taken on board the views of multiple stakeholders who have multiple objectives, different perspectives about what a good decision outcome is supposed to look like. And also in the face of great uncertainty. Okay, and uncertainty is something which I'm not going to spend too much time on here, but it's something which we have looked at in quite a lot of detail, in that with financial indicators, you're pretty sure how much money you've got into the bank, okay? But with environmental indicators and social indicators, the ability to quantify them is a lot more difficult, okay? So one has to take into account that any number that you put on a social or an environmental indicator is, in fact, not a single number, okay? It's a guess as to what the numbers could be, okay? So our industrial clients have come to us and said, how do we go about making our decisions in the face of all this complexity? And what we've done is gone and looked into the literature and looked at what's available out there in terms of decision support tools, okay? And there's been some work done on multi-criteria decision analysis, and we've tried to bring that together into a structured way of making decisions. Now, for those of you who were here yesterday, you would have heard the debate on reporting. And there have been a lot of references at this conference to reporting, okay? And only one mention has been made as to how do you use those indicators which you report. And that was, for those of you who were here, Eva Cox yesterday said, oh, people are taking on board indicators in their decision making. That may be true, but what we've found when we've actually approached people and said, right, how do you take these indicators on board? They've all gone, we have ways. And we've said to them, well, what are those ways? No, we know how we do it. And but actually trying to grill them and say to them, how do you make these structured decisions? Nobody's been able to tell us. And they're not just protecting their proprietary information, because they're the people who have approached us to make those decisions. They actually can't sit down and tell you, right, this is the way we make decisions. So that is a bit of a context to where the work that we're looking at is coming from. And what we've so what I want to show you this morning is a little bit of a few of the steps of how we go about making structured decisions, okay? And some of the considerations which you need to take into account in doing this. And effectively what we want to do within these structured decisions is we want to take structured decision making, is we want to take this mess of information, okay, the mess of information being multiple stakeholders, multiple objectives, large amount of uncertainty. We want to structure this into a solid problem, a defensible problem statement, okay, which we then want to analyze. And we want to take this well-structured problem and then analyze it to give us a decision outcome. So that decision outcome might be, where do we want to place our company in the next 20 years? It might be, where do we want to put a new processing site for our company? Okay, which site do we want to use? And an example of where we've used this, whether you agree with it or not, is with Sydney Water and evaluating where to place their desalination plant. Now, I'm not supporting desalination as a technology, but we went through this process with Sydney Water as to where we're going to put this, okay? And we landed up with Cornell, funnily enough, although we only had 2 sites to look at, okay? So it wasn't too much of a mess. So then the problems might be as simple as, do you want to recycle your water, or is it in fact more of an environmental issue to recycle water? There are various water management issues which come along with coal mining and electricity? And do you want to recycle your water? Does it actually not make environmental sense to take that water through the system again? Okay, and there are situations where it doesn't. So those are the types of problems which we want to come up with a decision about at the end of the day. I need one of those remote-y things. Okay, so if we look at this in a little bit more detail, we develop a process called a decision cycle. Okay, and the decision cycle, the reason why I've put up the word cycle there is, in fact, it's not a linear process. Okay, it's an iterative process which we use to go around in our decision making. Okay, and the other term that I've put up there is to use what's called a value-focused thinking approach. Okay, value-focused thinking. We want to focus more on what our values are rather than the outcome. Okay, we obviously are interested in the outcome, but we don't want to put that as our primary focus of the decision-making process. And the reason is that a value-focused thinking approach has been shown to give people the opportunity to make far more creative decisions. Okay, so it allows you to come up with a wider range of thinking. Now, what do I mean by a value-focused thinking approach? What you'll see here, if we look through the steps in the decision cycle, is that the place where we actually start looking at the alternatives that we want to select between comes rather far down at step number 4. We want to look at what is our problem, okay? What are the objectives which we're trying to meet in looking at this problem, okay? Sydney Water, our problem is we need to site a desalination plant. What are the objectives we're trying to meet? Well, it has to be close to the ocean. It has to be close to where it's being used, although Canal isn't, because we've got to go under Botany Bay, so that's a little bit challenging. We went through a technology selection exercise. Is it better to use reverse osmosis or thermal processing? Etc., etc. And only after we've identified what the objectives of our decision exercise are, do we actually start looking at the sites that we use. Okay? Because if we had started off and we said, we're only going to locate it, let's say, at Malabar, North Head. Are all of you from Sydney? I apologize. I'm making some assumptions here. Okay, you do know about the desalination exercise, I hope. And part of it was where do we site these plants? And if we had started off by choosing the sites first, we could have missed some sites, which would have been appropriate to us. Okay? We look at where do we want to place a mining company over the next 20 years. If we say, well, we want to carry on mining nickel, copper, whatever, we would come up with a couple of sites which have some reserves, and we would go and mine on those sites. However, if we said we need to carry on delivering the service of copper, which copper provides to society for the next 20 years, well, we can go and site some new mines. We can go and get into the recycling market, okay, which could in fact be a lot better. Good morning, sorry. Hi. We could get into the recycle market, all right? We could maybe go and look at getting into the fiber optics market for telecommunications, okay? So by taking this value-focused thinking approach, we want to provide the service that copper gives to society, as opposed to we want to mine some new copper, gives us a greater range of creative decisions, okay? And that's why we use this value-focused thinking approach, where we start off with a problem structuring exercise, and then we move on to our problem analysis, where we go and actually try and find the solutions to that problem exercise. And there are a couple of steps in there which I'm not going to go through. As I said, a significant part of it is the uncertainty and sensitivity analysis and robust analysis of our decisions. And then we move into the implementation. And a significant part of implementation, and this we've heard a lot about over the last 3 days, is the ongoing checks on yourself. Okay, and you've got to carry on checking that this decision that you made is in fact working for you, and where it's not, you need to write your course. You can't write your course every 5 minutes, but you do need to write the course of the company that you're working with. All right, please stop me if you want to, as I said, if you want to engage in any debate or ask any questions, feel free. Okay, so the first part of the structured decision making is to identify your stakeholders and then go and look at what your stakeholders' needs are. Okay? And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to spend, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes, and I did structure this session around reporting because I think that's quite a key part of corporate social responsibility. And as part of understanding that reporting, I think what we need to do is we need to engage with why are we producing reports. Now, there have been some statements made over the last couple of days as to why do we produce reports, but they have been fairly company focused or company centric. Okay, so we've got. It's really nice that we've got a fairly large group of stakeholders in this room, and maybe we can just go around in a moment and introduce ourselves to each other. And I'd like to spend a few minutes brainstorming. Who do you think uses company reports? Okay. What benefits can reporting have, both internally in the company and to external stakeholders? Because remember, these are publicly available company reports. And then the last thing is, did I say that already? Who uses them? So why produce them? Who uses them? And what benefits can they have? Okay. I think most of you were here the last couple of days, and most of you are aware of the fact that companies are being more and more pushed to produce reports which go beyond just their financial reporting and go into their beyond triple bottom line, but sustainability reporting. Okay. So should we have a quick scan around the room? I think let's do this as a group process. Unfortunately, they didn't bring me any butcher's paper or anything, so we'll just have a discussion session, and we'll move on from there. Should we start here?
Okay. I'm one of the owners of an organic food distribution company, and I'm also the chair of the Fair Trade Association of Australia.
Thanks.
Penny Richards, and I work for Earthwatch Institute.
Okay.
Nicole Patterson, I work for Bar and Water in Geelong, Victoria, as their water conservation officer.
Rick Freeman, I'm here as an individual, not representing my company, but I work for some major corporation as an IT manager.
Okay.
I'm doing my PhD in Department of Chemical University.
One of my colleagues.
I'm Clara Wilson, and I work for the Department of Engineering Consultancy.
I'm Damien Jurko. I'm originally from Geelong in Victoria, but now working at the Institute for Sustainable Futures, which is part of UTS, and water efficiency project.
Okay, so we have a meet-up over there. I'll let you guys chat after. So that's actually really nice. We've got, well, both NGO and commercial, effectively. We've got NGO and environmental. We've got effectively government, government or private? Government. Okay, we've got IT, which is great because a lot of the IT companies are starting to get pushed into, although, I mean, I hear that you work for Sunbeam, which is greater than IT, but we've got academia, we've got private consultancy, and cross-academic private consultancy, what it is. So maybe, does anybody want to start with the debate as to how they feel that reports are used, okay, or can be used, and what benefits good reporting can have? We want to talk here about good reporting. Anybody want to hit off?
There's always the question whether the reporting is just a feel-good factor for the company.
Okay, good. So yeah, that's the first point. Is it good? Is it feel good? And the term's green. I mean, the term greenwash is one that's come up a lot.
But I think it does. I mean, from the benefits point of view, it does give you the opportunity to see specifically where you're falling down and where you can make you feel good about
Yeah.
the improvements that you've made for the last report. So you can incrementally improve your involvement.
Yeah. No.
So a lot of reports actually don't capture where the company is travelling, in the sense that there are a lot of reports around that are just talking about what the organisation is doing, rather than actually measuring it against some targets. Yeah, and that's when I think the reporting is it is
Yeah.
really good there.
Uh,
I guess one of the things that a lot of the stuff was yesterday with the intangibles. And those are actually
Yeah. I mean, the intangibles are important. And I thought there was also another distinction to be made there, if I can. People were talking about the intangibles, and they were saying that all the reports give the the easy to reports. Okay, so we have all the indicators we can report, but the intangibles are, what about ethical leadership? How can you actually measure and report on ethical leadership? And that was an interesting question. But I thought there was another one which I find companies battle with, is the quantifiables are quite easy to report on. The non-quantifiables, which are still not intangible, is very mushy at this point. And I think that's where we fall down a lot with social indicators. And I mean, for those of you around, we had a presentation on the first day by Ray Anderson, who's the CEO of Interface Carpets, who you might have heard of, who are the sort of great case study in CSR, and yet he didn't touch once on sustainability, on social issues. I don't know if anybody noticed that. He said, we're doing well environmentally, all our products are environmentally sound, and maybe there is more to what their company does, but the social is still difficult, as is the intangibles. He needs to read another book. Yeah, he does, and then he can quote on that. Yeah. That's right. Okay, so, yeah, anybody else? Damien.
I think the point about targets is important, or it can be a tool for reflecting on where you've been and performances.
Yeah.
I suppose other external people to the company might use that as a tool to grade your performance, whether they're investors or those things, and I suppose that's where it becomes difficult if people are reporting in different ways, that there's not a sort of equal basis.
Equal basis, yeah.
Apples with that.
There's also the cynicism side of it that has also been raised over, I think, yesterday, using Westpac as an example, where, organisations and individuals who do watch these indices and the results when they come out, there's a huge amount of cynicism around those companies, in the sense that always get the top of the and the point was made, it is by sector, the measurements are by sector, but still there's someone raised a point yesterday, there's a gut feeling about a company, you get it from the papers, you get it from employees, you get it from many different areas, that it's a load of rubbish.
Yeah, that's right.
So how do you get past that in your reporting? Is, I think, a really key question. So it's a substantial report that is embedded in the organisation, so the employees are actually standing by it. Yeah.
I think you're very right there. I think the problem, is the checkbox approach. And that literally, those corporate social responsibility indices are checkboxes. That's all people have to do, and it doesn't tell you anything about what's going on in the company. And is that a fair interpretation of what you're saying? It's not incorporating.
That's what I understood yesterday. That's the way we look at it too. We read these things.
I'd agree with you, and I'll give you a good example on that, and I won't mention the company's name, but one of the companies that scored very highly on these, great place to work, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and they really are a well-known company from this point of view. And I heard of somebody who was called in to do a workshop with, one of the streams of the people, and what they wanted to resolve was to look at what's going on within their department and how well their teams are working together. And they made them do a process whereby they sat down, they were all given a piece of paper, and they were asked to draw what they felt about working in their departments and with their particular managers. And people drew prison cells, they drew monsters, and these, and I think somebody drew a picture of hell. And this was a company which has this great, front cover of the Age and the Sydney Morning Herald every time these indices come out. And that's what's actually going on in the company. So there's a big problem going on there. Okay.
Is that a question of the scale at which it's good? Maybe at the corporate scale for shareholders, maybe for the individual, maybe you're talking earlier in terms of even thinking of diverse options for value, but it's thinking about how we deliver services responsibly in society, whether it's copper or fibre optic cables. If you're a copper company or a fibre optic cable company, it might not be in your capacity to expand your horizons to take the sustainable option. So I think part of the question with reporting might be that it's a snapshot in time, but it's also a snapshot of one level of aggregation.
Yeah. And then on the ground level, it's I think
at the moment there's a problem whereby just the fact that a company is reporting puts them on a pedestal because it's hardly anyone else is. So we're not actually comparing reports and saying, well, this company is reporting this lot, because just they're reporting at the top echelon.
That's correct.
And also, another benefit of reporting from an IT perspective for me is that it creates a focal point in order to make sure that all the underlying data is there to create the report. But that's assuming that the reports actually can actually focus down onto that and get further information. But a lot of these reports are very motherhood statements. They're not actually real based up in quantifiable data.
That's right. Yeah, and I think the challenge lies to organisations as to, do they produce reams of paper, or do they produce something that's digestible, and where is the balance? Who's going to be using those reports is the question. And I don't know, I have a personal feeling on that, is you need summary reports for those who want them. But on your website, you need every single piece of that data if somebody wants to be able to use it. So, so it is a good point. It's the exercise of data collection. I think let's, I've drawn up a couple of points here, which reflect some of what you've been saying. People are starting to realize that it's going to affect profitability in the future, and I think the presentation from IAG, the Insurance Australia group, they engage with the fact that climate change is going to impact them in a huge way. And the involvement with communities, rewarding people for using their cars less, that sort of thing. Personally, and you can argue on this, I think that does have merit, and I think it's people, yes, they're doing things in their own business interests, but it is starting to have an impact. Okay, so they're starting to realize that engaging with the broader environment and the broader society is necessary, as it's going to have a long-term impact on their business. I mean, admittedly, they only look at the things that will impact them on their business, and then you can bring into account is that true corporate social responsibility? Is that protecting yourself? A statement I heard, which I quite like: we produce a sustainability report, therefore we are sustainable. I thought that was quite an interesting point. Actually, as an aside, sorry, I'm not going aside. I went to a presentation it was David Suzuki and two other authors who were talking about environment and sustainability, and a very well-meaning young woman stood up and said something that she prefaced her question to the panel, and she said, I know that you are preaching to the converted here because we all live sustainably. And I thought that's a very interesting thing. You drove here, or you came by car, and you're wearing clothes that were probably produced in China. And I think the misconception that, we have an awareness, we have an outreach program or something, means that we are sustainable is very misguided, is my personal feeling on that. You don't look convinced there, Penny.
No, it's one of those words that I think we in fact don't know the answers to what sustainability is.
Yeah.
Scientists don't know the
exactly
answers to what sustainability is, and that's why I think I agree with you. I think people just don't understand it because we as a general population don't understand it.
Yeah. And then how can you make a claim like that? Yeah.
And it changes.
Exactly.
It evolves.
Yeah.
We're not where we were 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
We have a different take on climate change.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years ago.
Exactly.
Populations.
Yeah. It's a changing field. Yeah, go for it.
I've just been reflecting on myself, is thinking, well, how would my actions change if the world around me wasn't the unsustainable world that it is, or if it just happened to be sustainable at this present moment? What would I be doing that is different? Would I really be doing that? We lived in this sort of a perfect world. Would that really change our...
I'd go it the other way. I mean, if it was a perfect world, then our whole behaviours would be changed.
Yeah.
How would they be changed?
I think of it individually. I guess my background is I develop management systems, environmental management systems.
Yeah.
And one of the key things is engage. You develop it for the company and help the company to engage in
better practices. But you also need to engage on an individual level, because it's the individuals within the organisation that are actually going to make the changes.
Yeah.
So you have to personalise some of the actions that have to happen, and to personalising, it's things, just the basic things like turning off the computer screen, just the really obvious things, and actually putting that into context of what that actually means if they personally don't do it. I just think that it's a lot of it's to do with actual personal behaviour, which then drives. You have your corporate stuff.
Yeah.
You have to have individual mind change to make any difference.
Yeah, but the question is, I guess the question is, in a sustainable world, would we be living in the consumerist, we couldn't possibly be living in this sort of way. I mean, I reckon subsistence farming and living in huts built out of wood is about as close as you're going to get to sustainable, and only burning enough wood that the forest can replace for your energy source. So I think it would look very different, and we need a population of whatever 22 planets less or 21 planets less or whatever. So yeah, it's an interesting question. Could we be living this sort of life and yet still have it sustainably? And would we be doing, or would it have to be a vast paradigm shift? Don't know. We'll leave it up to Earthwatch. Penny, did you come up with some answers for us? Okay, so we've spoken about a lot of those. We're obviously coming under a lot of stakeholder pressure, both from shareholders, and shareholders, I guess, are starting to ask the questions as to, even if it comes down to things like product responsibility, people are avoiding gambling and tobacco funds to some degree. People are obviously still investing them and still working in them. And then we've got accountability to the local and broader community, either the communities on which we impact directly by our operations, or to NGOs and that who are starting to put on pressure to start reporting and improve. So these are some of the motivations why people would report. The other thing, obviously, is the rest of the sector or market is doing it. You can't be a big mining company these days and not report on your performance. Okay. And then we're starting to see changing legislative environments, and there's currently a Senate inquiry into reporting and what should become mandatory in terms of reporting. Okay, so and in the future, I think there is going to be more legislation around reporting. And just to repeat for those of you who weren't here yesterday, I think the quote that stuck with me out of yesterday's presentation, we were talking about how far does legislation need to go in order for it, how far do we need to take this legislative environment? And the one comment that was made, if we legislate to the point where you cannot possibly be bad, how can you possibly be good? And that was an interesting thing. Do we just bring everybody up so that they're doing enough? I thought it was a nice thought. Okay. And then some other ideas which we've brought up. Anglo-American, I heard a presentation by the person who's in charge of their global reporting, stated that one of the biggest benefits of reporting is merely their opportunities to internally reflect. Okay, and as they reflect, the more they come up with things that they need to go and look at. Whether they're doing anything with the data is another question. That's another argument. But yes, go for it. Yeah.
As an NGO, we have, and I'm just thinking this as you put up the last slide, we work, 80% of our revenue here in this part of the world comes from business partnerships, business and corporate partnerships. And we work with a lot of leading companies as well as smaller companies and businesses, government, and trusts and foundations. One of the things that frustrates me out of a number of the companies we actually work with is, and this was raised yesterday in some examples, that our relationship is essentially through the corporate affairs department.
Yeah.
Which for me just doesn't work. And and they're putting out reports.
Yeah.
They're talking about what they're doing, but it's a philanthropic approach, it's an add-on, it's not embedded in the organisation, because you're in a hot seat. You've got deliverables to the partnership, and they might be committed to elements of your partnership that you've developed with them,
Yeah.
but a dozen others. But you go out to a business unit the other side of Australia, and what are you talking about? You know,
Yeah.
and this is the thing that really frightens me about the reporting
Yeah.
mechanisms, because those companies are turning out brilliant reports.
Yeah.
And we'd be showcasing them as very responsible companies as a result of that report. But we sit in a very privileged position in what we know about the company, and you know we're educators, so we're on a, don't like to use the word, a journey
Yeah.
for them to change their thinking. But you know it's only in that small unit of the
Yeah.
business.
I think that's
So I don't know if anyone's got an answer to that, or
Yeah.
but it grates on me every time we talk about reporting.
Yeah.
That's a big
Right.
thing, I think, with any organisation. I mean, we've only got probably 250 people working for our organisation, and trying to get different sectors of the organisation to understand what someone else is trying to do is really difficult.
Yeah.
In my position, I'm trying to encourage not only our whole customer base, but also our internal employees to look at ways in which they can save water. Because you automatically think someone from a water authority, well, of course they're going to know, you know, they're going to be interested in that stuff. But the hardest thing is working with your internal employees and, you know, letting them know and ensuring that they know when they're out in the community, these are the types of things that we're doing, and these are the partnerships that we've got, and you need to ensure that you encourage that type of stuff. It's so hard.
Well, and then scale that by 1,000 times, where you've got 1,000 times the number of employees. And I guess that comes back to the challenge of, you know, if you BHP Billiton and you've got, anybody know how many sites? Hundreds of sites, Damon, do you have any idea? Huge. You know, do you produce a 20-page digestible report that everybody looks at, or do you produce these reams of documentation which specify every community program that if anybody wants to have access to them, they can go and drill down?
I think, I mean, I work partly in education as well, and the biggest thing trying to show employees, everyone is so time poor, getting the time to read anything is
Exactly.
almost impossible.
Yeah.
So the only time you can actually communicate anything to anyone is setting up a face-to-face or some sort of a program that doesn't take up a lot of time, but you know that they're actually going to listen to you and take in that information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your comment makes me think maybe it's come along as more a top-down thing. The company realises we need to be good at sustainability reports. Let's go and do them. Maybe would there be a place? I remember back in the, I don't know whether it was in the 70s or in the 80s in Japan, they sort of had the revolution with total quality manufacturing systems. That it was more a bottom-up thing, that the employees embraced it. And
that's a funny thing coming from reporting. I worked for an organisation who there was someone from different sectors of the organisation who was involved in the reporting of a sustainability report.
Yeah.
So everyone knew what was going on. They were consulting with their own department, so everyone knew that this thing was being developed. Whereas now I'm working for an organisation who it's only coming from one sector, so no one has any idea what's going on, what's being put into it. And, you know, they're the ones that are managing those, they're the ones that are managing the data, the information, and they're not having any input into that.
And
Which is interesting.
And I mean, the point that was brought up at some, I haven't got it on this slide, but I think later on, is that what a lot of companies are still doing to varying degrees is actually getting outside consultants to come in and do their sustainability reporting. So there you've got absolutely no connect between the two lots of people.
Although a lot of the time it's to verify them. You're going to verify
Yeah.
reports rather than
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
We help structure it.
Yeah. That's so structured. So I wasn't putting down consultants. I was just saying it is a concept. Yeah. Putting it in context.
Because often they
Yeah.
don't know where to start.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So you help them to sort of structure where they might want to go. But
Yeah.
you don't necessarily always go and do it.
Don't do it. It depends on the company.
But with
That's
these corporate reports that are coming out,
Yeah.
sustainability reports, is there no independent auditing?
A lot of some of the yes, as part of their financial accounts, they usually the big four accounting firms. Often they also get them to verify off the environmental statements being made.
I think there's pressure on those. Yeah, I think there's more and more pressure going on to the big accounting firms
actually broaden their accounting systems from the basic economic model to encompass those other areas. I think there's a lot more pressure, and I think you'll find a lot more of those big businesses have departments that are focusing on research in those areas.
Because it is a similar problem that we have with fair trade auditing, that they had to make sure that they would get a true idea of the stakeholders within the cooperative and whether they were seeing the result of the impact of the premium that they were getting. And I think if there is auditing and they have random auditing goes to the level of the most basic employee, then it's unavoidable for that information to come out. But it's a case of whether or not it gets to the point where there's a standard, and it's all about benchmarking. If you have the benchmark, then you can have a standard, you have someone implementing it. And so for them to get onto the sustainability impact index or whatever, they have to be independently audited. Organisations can't audit themselves.
I think with the corporate responsibility index, which is the this award that's given, and it's a voluntary subscription. As far as I know, that's independently audited, is it not? I don't know if anybody's. So that's one situation. So that's not a report, but that's choosing to be marked against the St James Centre of Ethics.
So
they've set up.
I
think they use Ernst & Young or PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they actually audit all of the claims made. But that's not around actual performance or reporting. That's around effectively this tick box approach. Do we have a policy for this? Do we have a policy for that? And that is audited. So PricewaterhouseCoopers or Ernst & Young will go in and say, okay, we've cited the policy for this and we've cited the policy for that, but it doesn't tell us anything about their performance.
Yes, there are very different levels of audit.
Exactly, what you're looking for. Financial auditing, we go a lot deeper. Okay, should we move on a little bit, because if that's right. I think the one thing that we didn't get onto. So these are some more points as to why people claim that they report. But the one thing that I think Damien, you touched on it briefly, was investors and both people making decisions internally and investors outside who might want to use this information for reporting. I'm going to bring us back into my whole thing that I put up earlier about structured decision making, and go on just from a simple example of some of decisions which might be made by investors surrounding a company. Sorry, that we've kind of touched on as well. I'm just threw down some of my ideas on this. So as we've sort of indicated, there are a lot of frameworks which people use to report on. Okay, so those that are the performance reporting, and those that are the tick box, the kind of corporate responsibility index. And what we were hearing yesterday was that they are trying to match up, sort of map the corporate responsibility index onto the other frameworks. And the Global Reporting Initiative is arguably the most well-known, and the one that's to some degree becoming the standard across companies for reporting. Okay, it's a voluntary disclosure standard, no auditing at this point, and effectively you can claim to be a GRI compliant reporter without actually ever having been audited at all. Okay, it's been set up. It's a huge multi-stakeholder process, and I think it's quite an interesting example of a situation where you've had a whole lot of stakeholders coming together. I think there's more than 5,000 stakeholders in more than 80 countries that have actually been involved in setting up these guidelines. Effectively, they consist of the reporting guidelines, which tell you what you have to report, and then there's some support documentation. There's technical protocols as to how you're supposed to measure that reporting, and there are sector-specific guidelines. So there's one for the mining sector, particularly. I know I think there's an HR one. So there are a few ones which specifically relate to certain sectors of the economy. And the latest guidelines are from 2002, but they're due for updating in 2006. And they recently had a set of worldwide workshops where they were getting input on the 2002 guidelines. And there were workshops here in Sydney. I think there was one down in Melbourne. I don't know if anybody got to go to that. It was quite competitive to actually get a seat there. I tried, and to no avail. They had one representative from each institution. So at the University of Sydney, we got one seat, even though I could never track down who that person was, and it's just huge. Okay. So what I find is that a lot of people actually have heard of the GRI. They've kind of know what it encapsulates. But nobody's actually sat down. I mean, how many of you have sat down and looked at all the indicators that are involved? Have you actually looked? Well, now's your chance. Okay, so what I've done is I've downloaded, and some of these are my own summaries. I've kind of to squash it into pages and stuff. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to spend a few minutes actually looking at the GRI indicators and just getting a sense of the breadth of information which is actually required to be. There you go. Sorry. The breadth of information that's required to be reported. Okay, have a look at this. I mean, we sit with 13 economic indicators, fairly well-formed economic indicators. We have 35 environmental indicators. It's a lot of information to gather if you're a BHP Bulletin or a National Australia Bank. And then we're sitting with, 17 labour practices indicators, 14 HR practices, 7 society indicators or practices, and a couple of product responsibility ones. Number 11 got repeated there. 11 product responsibility indicators. So you're looking at a significant amount of information which needs to be gathered in order to do these reports. Okay, and despite the fact that they recommend an incremental approach to reporting, at the end of the day, they expect you to report on every single one of these. Okay, even if your thing is not relevant to our organization. So obviously, if you don't have something that's relevant, then that's not relevant. So what I'd like you to do is role play. Well, we can do this together in the room, or maybe I'd like you to spend 5 minutes doing it on your own. Is think about you as an investor. Okay, you're a socially responsible investor, or perhaps you head up a managed fund that is looking for companies in which it wants to make socially responsible investments. And I want you to go and select 3 economic indicators. Just give them a quick scan. 3 of the environmental indicators, or 3 or 4, and 3 or 4 of the social indicators, as to what you think you would look at as your key indicators for making your decisions around this company. Okay, so it's a simplified exercise. This obviously is going to bring out what your own values are. Okay, and it's quite difficult sometimes to choose 3. Because you might go, hang on, I'm interested in blah, 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 but it'll be interesting to see what your top 3 is. And what I want you to see as you're going through is the difference between quantitative indicators and qualitative indicators. So a quantitative indicator would be your net sales. A qualitative indicator would be, what is it, number 7? There's one in here on, do we have a policy against child labour? Yes or no. So there's some of them that are qualitative, some of them that are quantitative. So spend 3 minutes doing that, and then we'll reflect back and see what people's thoughts are on that. If you want to ask me any questions about not understanding any of them, I'll try. Damien. There are pens at the back in case anybody doesn't have, and there's also water at the back. There's no tea and coffee yet. But daunting, isn't it? While I'm standing here, does anybody want a glass of water? I can pour you some. Stick up your hand. No? One. Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah.
Social or 3 social within each?
I was actually thinking of 3 social in total. Yeah.
Okay.
You can have 4 or 5 tops, okay? Just to give you a bit of insight as to why I've chosen 3 to 4 economic indicators, is all the theories of decision making say that when people make decisions, and you've probably heard the statistics before, and I'm probably going to get it wrong anyway, but people can generally hold at any one time a maximum of 9 pieces of information in their mind. Any more than that, you cannot hold it in your mind at any one time. So if you try and take 10 or 11 pieces of information, people can't engage with that. Some people can engage with less, 6 or 7, but 9 is about the maximum I've heard, and there are varying statistics on it. And that's why I've asked you to look at 3 indicators from each group, which gives us 9. Beyond that, what people do is they start looking at various mechanisms of aggregating indicators or prioritizing indicators and then chucking out the ones that they don't use. So there's actually, we can't do more than that in our own minds. Morning. Hi. Walked in at a silent moment on our workshop. You can join in. Hi, I'm Brett Cohen.
Hi, I'm Bernard O'Brien.
Hello, Bernard. Nice to meet you. We've been talking about indicators and reporting, and what I've asked everybody to do is just take a look through the Global Reporting Initiative indicators and choose some that they would feel are important as a socially responsible investor. So, just get an idea of where you fit into the whole thing.
From Discovery Beta.
Oh, okay. So
we invest in innovation and technology.
all right. Okay. Great. Right. Well, then you're a perfect person to report on this. Right. Has everybody got some of their favourites marked up?
Yes.
Yeah. Already. Good. Okay. All right. So hopefully that gave you a sense of the breadth of information that is asked by the Global Reporting Initiative. But you hopefully also got a sense of some of the stuff is we have a policy on X, Y, Z. Exactly. What does it prove? So you're reporting on this. We're GRI compliant, tick. But what do we actually prove by having reported on this? We have a policy on child labour. Do we actually implement it?
So do they have to, if they do this, they have to do it annually?
Annually. Every year these people will put it out. It costs them fortunes.
And is there no points of comparison in that? Like, what score do we have in comparison to last year? They don't even get asked to do that themselves, never mind independently. That's not really
No.
A lot of this, once they've done it once,
Yeah.
some of it's description of policy.
Yeah.
Policy, that's it.
Yes,
Yeah,
no,
that's right.
There's no evidence or proof.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even not going as far as evidence and proof, even to say to them, what is it this year compared to
Yeah.
last year? Even
Targets and-
even if they do
Yeah.
that.
Some, yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to show basically unless you put my feeling is, and I think you'd all agree with me, unless you put these in the context of targets and benchmarking, there's absolutely no value to it whatsoever. So a lot of the companies will report, this is our target for this year, this is what we want to we're benchmarking ourselves against 1990 or whatever. So a lot of the companies do it. I'll have to give them that. But there's no consistency in what they're doing, how they're doing. I'll show you a little bit later an example of some of them that are reported. One of the companies reports, I don't even know what term they used. I'll come back to it. I'll point it out to you. They report against an internal benchmark, which I plowed through their website, I plowed through their sustainability reports, and I cannot find out how they get this averaging index that they're using. So they've improved by 10% against this averaging index, but it means absolutely nothing to the common person. So,
Or the uncommon person.
or the uncommon person, exactly. So it's a challenge. That is the big challenge with reporting, is what does it mean? Okay. So you've got a sense of that, hopefully. Can we get some idea of what you thought was important? Quickly. Natasha, go for it.
Well, starting from the beginning, for me, I felt it was important for them to have a description of that policy, of the impact on their communities and
Okay.
and programs.
So this is under society, okay. Just maybe give the reference number so that people can...
SO1.
SO1, okay.
Oh, more.
Yeah, just give a quick indicator.
Evidence in HR, evidence of consideration of human rights impacts as part of the investment and procurement decisions.
Okay.
Including selection of suppliers and contracts.
All right.
I have to say that I filled that all in and then I turned the page and went, oh.
Right, a little more.
So
Okay.
I might have missed some very important ones on that page.
Okay.
Policy and procedure, it's the same sort of thing, except internal, involving information at LA4.
Okay.
Negotiation with employees of the changing and reporting organisations operations.
All right. And just on the environmental quickly. I'm not going to go into the social too much. I think we can gloss over... sorry, not the social, the economic too much. Because I feel that economic reporting and decision-making around economic reporting is very well established. So I don't want to go into too much here.
The one that stands out to me
yeah.
there is significant environmental impacts of principal products.
Okay.
And percentage of weight of the products that are sold in terms of, that's EM50, the useful life and the amount of it that is actually reclaimed.
Yeah. Okay. So it's sort of extended producer responsibility, end of life
So
management.
that relates to me and everything I do. More than
Yeah.
anything else.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. Okay. Let's just move through quickly and get a couple of people. Sorry, sir. I didn't get your name. Hi. Sorry, EN10.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's have a look.
My understanding of diversity of employment.
Okay. All right. So diversity of employment.
So description of equal opportunity.
Okay. All right. And on the environmental front, do you want to give us two of your environmental ones quickly? Oh, you haven't got any on the environmental. Okay. Thank you. Penny, just a couple of them.
I didn't do what you said.
Okay, that's fine.
I didn't like
I
the
can deal with
specific ones down, but when I went through the environmental ones, I think what I would be looking for is an acknowledgement of the company's use of natural resources and emissions.
Yes.
Just at a glance, and then I'd be looking for the actual programs or the implementation of various activities that would lead to mitigation or abatement.
Okay.
And to involve people. I mean, one that sticks out here, objectives, programs and targets for protecting and restoring native ecosystems and species in degraded areas. So I'd be looking for the doing part.
Okay.
Because that would I'd pick up the sense that the company was moving forward and doing something.
All right, which you're not finding as a result of these. Yeah.
So,
Which you're not going to be finding as a result of these in a big way. Okay. Good, thank you. So.
I suppose this is coming from a water authority's point of view. I listed EN7, which is basically descriptions of major impacts on biodiversity associated with terrestrial, freshwater and marine environments. Incidents of fines for non-compliance, ensuring that you comply with all the national, international and regional type of standards.
That's great.
And I agree in terms of total natural resource use.
Okay.
Management of that. So I could have
All right.
ticked
A
off
lot of those. And on your social indicator? Yes, sorry.
Emma. On the EN16, the fines. I kind of looked at that, but to me, it's so rare when an organisation actually is fined, and so I don't often see that as a reflection of their true performance. I don't know
Yeah.
Pretty bad. I mean, it does happen quite regularly to an organisation in Geelong.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you have to do
This
something
is
pretty
why
crazy
this
to be up there, to be in on that.
Yeah.
I think I was also trying to look at it from, rather than, if I was looking in terms of wanting to invest in a company, rather than trying to see how many fines did they have. I would be looking at the other point of view and seeing what their intent, trying to see what their intentions are.
Yeah.
Because I felt like quite a lot of these were like, my God, if they even had one of those, there's no chance that I would look at them. You know, a lot of those things that they just kind of crossed over my consideration list.
Yeah. Did you have any social ones?
Social, I was looking at probably the breakdown of the workforce.
Yeah. So the same. Yeah. Oh no, it's not. You mentioned diversity. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah.
HR1, so description of policy guidelines, corporate structure, all those types of things.
Yeah.
And PR1, the description of policy, preserving customer health and safety.
Okay. Yeah, which must be big on the influence. Bernard.
Well, my primary economic indicator is not there.
Which was?
Intellectual property.
Intellectual property, okay.
Intellectual property aspect.
Yeah.
An example, a reverse example, I read in the paper on Tuesday, and it's Brambles, one of Australia's oldest companies, is selling off everything except for their data storage division.
Okay.
And check pallets.
Yeah.
50% of their business is coming down to intellectual property. And I believe that, what's certainly coming to the fore is that the more intellectual property people that companies leverage, the more successful they'll become.
Excellent.
In the social indicators, or environmental indicator, EN14, significant environmental impacts of principal products.
Okay.
Because these days, what we do, I'm in a startup business.
Yeah.
And what we do is we have a program to make every big things in there that we get to focus on is environmental impact and then society. Gives products
Yeah.
a positive and ion or negative
Okay.
impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then in societal HR2, evidence of consideration of human rights impacts.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Great. Let's just hear from the rest and then let's move on. Yeah.
Under environmental, I was looking at 15% of weight of the products sold that is reclaimable.
Okay.
In the actual claim.
Well, that's quite a big one in terms of IT. I mean, in terms of the impacts of computers is big.
Some there,
Yeah, and for some is so. Yeah.
Energy consumption footprint of major products, greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
And then for social, looking at HR1 and HR3,
All right.
SO1, and also HR6.
Just 6 was
Policy of excluded
child labour. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Vikram.
In terms of environmental indicators, I found like total material use other than water, EN1.
Okay.
It plays a significant role, and another is greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
And the third one is total amount of waste by type and destination.
That's okay. EN11. Okay.
EN5 is significant increase of chemical organisms.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
It's
Or-
got to do with waste generation, like lots of waste, which is either recycled or it is like
Yeah.
which is harmful to the environment. So we need to think about
Okay.
what sort of waste is being generated.
Yeah. Yeah. Morning. Hi. How you doing? Okay. I'll give you one of these and you can catch up with us. We're looking at reporting indicators and what people actually use for their reporting and what do people do with those indicators once they've been reported. Okay, last year, Claire.
Environmental, I thought EN7 was sort of the first thing.
Okay, biodiversity. Yeah.
Their impact. And then the energy consumption footprinting, EN19,
Yeah.
EN18, sorry, and EN14 as well.
Okay, impacts of products. Great. Damien, last one, and then I think we need to move on in the interest of time. Yeah.
Inputs in energy and outputs of your energy footprint of your product. But from a social perspective, I thought the things that are important are health and safety. That was LA7. Maybe that's sort of, I think that's still important at a company level.
Yeah.
And I also had the R1, the health products, and
Yeah.
SO2, which is primary, not so much here, but for a global company.
Okay. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 people all investing in socially responsible companies who all have different viewpoints, effectively. There are a couple of common sentiments about human rights protection, but if you noticed, I think not that many people had crossovers, okay? I put up my choice there, somewhere, and it's different to a lot of yours. Okay, as I said, I'm not going into economic, not because they're not important, but I feel I don't want to focus on it. We've got limited time here. Environmental, I come from a mining and an electricity utility background, so my eye immediately goes to how we're using our energy. Okay, I'm obsessed with greenhouse gases, so that's going to be what I'm going for. And then incidents and fines, I found an interesting one, just in the terms of I think a similar sentiment to yours, Claire, is that, people don't get fined that often. Are people actually reporting those incidents and fines? And how significant is that? And how do they report incidents? Okay, there was something else. And then I was interested in health and safety, the injuries and fatalities, policies on child labour. It's a particular bugbear of mine, is child labour. And although I heard an interesting argument, I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago in South Africa, and they were talking about child labour, and somebody put up their hand, and everybody was going, what kind of child labour, what kind of child labour? Somebody put up their hand and said, 50% of the AIDS orphans in the world are in southern Africa. These are the sole providers for themselves and their siblings, and perhaps their grandparents. There isn't any social security in southern Africa. how can we put these people out of jobs when that's all they're going to get to eat? It's a very controversial argument, but how do you engage with something like that? It's a difficult one. You don't. Okay, that's a good approach, Natasha. I don't know if anybody's heard that argument, but it was a bit of an eye-opener to me. I mean, the other argument was, well, they're going to be exploited, they're going to be paid less than everybody else, and there are a whole lot of adults who are unemployed as well. Shouldn't we be getting the adults and then, fostering community programs and that sort of thing? But in an environment where people don't have, and I mean, India, and lots of kids who are working. It's a good question, interesting question. And then I was quite interested in, I just put down awards there, not because it's that important to me, but it did provide some variety. Okay, so, I don't know why I put that up again. I think it's because, because what I want to do is to go through, just bring you back to this decision cycle. What we've done now is we've sort of scoped out our problem, we've identified what's important to us, and at this point we start to identify the alternatives of what we're trying to decide around. And at this stage I've gone and identified 3 mining companies, which I know I want to go and invest in on the basis of who is the most, responsible, okay, in a generic sense. And so what I do is I take my indicator set and I go and populate a performance table, okay, and I say I've got mining company number 1, number 2, and number 3. I go and look at my indicators and I go and try and find out how these companies are performing, okay. 3 real companies. I did this project, it took me I think a month to populate the whole GRI table for 6 companies, and now these are all companies that report in accordance with the GRI. It took me a month to extract the information for the 6 companies on all the GRI indicators. Okay, so supposed to be accessible information, try and find it, it's not. And drilling down was a big challenge as to what level they report on. And what I want to do now is I want to decide as to which company I'm going to invest in. So let me go and have a look at everybody who's reporting according to the GRI. Okay, company number 1 tells me around their direct energy use. They tell me how much energy is used on each of their sites, okay? And they tell me what types of energy are used, okay? They use this much electricity, they use this much coal on site, they use this much gas, etc., renewables, okay? So I know per site what these people do, and I could probably add it up so that I know they use X number of terajoules of energy or whatever. Company number 2 tells me, well, I use this amount of energy per product group, okay? In other words, aluminium, coal, iron, whatever they mine. But I don't know what type of energy they use. Great, so I know that they use energy, big deal, but I can't tell what's renewables, what is the more sustainable or the preferable energy type. And there's very, very difficult to compare it to company number 1. And then company number 3 is per product group for different types of energies. So I've got energy per site, energy per product group, and energy per product group per site. It makes comparison very difficult. They sound like they're having far more fun than us next door. Should we peek through? Okay. So then again, greenhouse gases is similar. The one reports CO2 only. The other one reports all greenhouse gases. Okay. What about the really bad ones? I mean, methane is 32 times worse as a greenhouse, or whatever, 32, 34 times worse as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So it's great that you report all your energy emissions from carbon dioxide. What about the methane that you're displacing while you're doing your mining and setting off into the environment? What about, the specialty chemicals, the SF6s that are 350 times? 12,000 times worse than carbon dioxide. They're obviously used far less extensively. Okay, we then have our incidents and fines. Okay, they didn't have any recorded ones. Okay, these people had told us about the number and level of incidents and fines, how much they paid in fines, and they gave us one example of a significant fine where they did something wrong and were slapped on the wrist. Okay, and the last one said, okay, well, we only had one fine and we had a couple of incidences. Okay, so I've got all this information that's here, and what I wanted to show you is that people have taken these GRI reports, they've given us this information, and there's no ability to compare across companies. And that is one of the big things, is you spend all this money, and I mean, we've spoken about it quite significantly now. Okay. Okay, I've just made the point there that internal benchmarking and improvement is an important aspect of this. Pardon?
Who did you choose?
We'll get on to that now. Okay. My last point at the bottom there is the one thing that it can be useful, around reporting is that they're supposed to give you a GRI reporting index which says, okay, number 1 we've reported on page X, number 2 we've reported on page Y. And that's quite useful if you've got a web-linked GRI report. So some of the companies are fairly easy to navigate around where they put it in HTML format, and then you don't have to sift through your piles of paper. You can actually go and find the information that you want. So I think as companies move more towards GRI reporting on the internet with web-linked, with HTML stuff, you'll be able to better navigate around. Still doesn't address the point of what do we do with that information. Okay, I think I want to leave the reporting aspect there, and I just want to talk to you a little bit further about how people use information to make decisions. And I want to give you a couple of examples. We've got about 15 minutes left as to what people do with information. And the one way that companies love making decisions is to use aggregated indicators. Okay? Sum everything up, and you have a single score. Do well on that score, and you've done well. You do badly on that score, and you've done badly. Okay? So they might sum up all the environmental and social and whatever and say, we've improved, we haven't improved on an aggregated indicator. You all know what I'm talking about, hopefully? Yeah? Okay. Don't want you to be put off by the sun signs there, but I think most people know what the sigma is. We all come from a vaguely scientific background. And they will do this in one of two ways. They'll either just sum all the criteria up, okay? So all of those things that I've identified as being important, they'll add up, and that'll give me an answer. Or they'll say, hang on, let's put a relative importance onto that indicator, and we'll assign some sort of weight to a particular indicator, and then we 80% interested in our economics and 5% interested in everything else. And this is how people do it. I mean, we're working with a major energy utility who's planning their power station infrastructure for the next 25 years, and they've said they've said what I've just said. They said we're 80% interested in economics, and we want to take into account the non-quantifiables, they call it, and we're giving that 20%. So we said, how did you come up with 80 and 20%? Feels right. Literally, this is billions of dollars in investment, and they've gone on these contributions as feel right. Okay, so it's a bit of a scary thing that people assign that in that way. So what I want to do is just show you some examples of this quickly. Good morning. Okay, so the first way that we do it is just summing without any form of weighting involved. The one thing that you have to note is, in order to sum indicators, you've got to bring them down to a common measurement scale. Okay, you can't sum 1,000 tons of CO2 with 10 incidents of fines with 20 people killed on your operations, because it doesn't make any sense. The CO2 will dominate completely. So there are various sort of established techniques of bringing scores down to comparable scales. Okay, and they're quite contestable, but they're fairly established, and it all comes down to this value-based approach that we use. All right, and I'd happily engage with discussion with any of you as to how one can go about it later on, if you wish, and can send you some stuff on this. But let's say I've gone and taken this and I've brought all of my performance scores that I showed you in that table, and I've said, okay, some of them I'm giving them on their actual performance, let's say relative to their targets. So the one around direct energy use, in fact, Penny, I think you raised the concern, are they benchmarking and targeting? Direct energy use, they generally benchmark. Okay, and because of the pressures in terms of greenhouse gases, most companies you'll actually find in their reports will say, we're moving towards this target, we're actually going for, there's 20% improvement in last year, etc., etc. Okay, so some of those scores I've allocated have been, and these really are made up, so don't go buying your shares on the basis of this. So I brought those back to a common scale, and I've said, okay, this lot have performed well in their energy use, and they've reduced from last year, and their emissions are relatively low per unit of product or something like that. They haven't done too well. These guys have done reasonably well. Okay, and I've given them all a score and summed them up. Okay, and on the basis of this, go ahead and invest in company 3. It's a score of 4.6. and therefore they are the highest score, so that is my preferred company. Okay, you can see everybody's a bit uneasy about this, but this is how people often make decisions. Okay. So now what I'd like to do is say, okay, as a company, I'm not going to weight all of these things equally. And what I'd like you to do is, for the environmental and social indicators, if I'm asking you to give all of these a weighting, and so those six indicators are weighting as to how important you feel they are to you. And I want your 6 indicators to add up to 1. So for these, okay, those 6, give it a weighting between, or a percentage if you like. So it might be 10, 20, 20, 0, 50, 0, adds up to 100%. Okay, so just do that quickly, and let's have a look at what people come up with. Mark, I don't know if you are Mark, right? Hi. Are you happy to just sit and observe for the next 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Done, Damien? Yeah, just gut feeling. It's not going to hold you to it. All right. I think most people are nearly there. Okay. We've only got a few minutes left, so I'm not going to go around the room. Just okay. In terms of these, what's the best way to do this with people suggesting how they? Okay, can I just have a show of hands who rated sort of the sum of the environmental ones more than the sum of the social ones? Okay, so we have 3 people, 4 people. All right, so we have sort of quite a fairly strong environmental leaning, but we have a couple of... So are you 50-50? You 50-50 as well. Okay, so we had about a 50-50. Who of you... rated greenhouse gas emissions in environmental the highest? Okay. Everybody. Okay. Who of you rated injuries and fatalities the highest? Really? Okay. All right. And then who of you rated the policies on child labour? Is probably the rest of you? No? 1 or 2. Okay. So what we've got an indication of here is we've got an indication of people who are, well, we've got a bit of a split there, but effectively we've got people who have got a broad global perspective on things, okay, your impression about greenhouse gas emissions. Those who would rate child labour would stick with that sort of global stakeholder viewpoints.
I that one because I felt if it was in a third world country, I probably would rate that much higher. But in Australia, I guess I feel
okay. Yeah.
pretty protected against it, so I don't rate it as something that I really look for.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Damien, were you abused as a child? Made to work? Okay. And that's a very good point, so I'll come back to that later, is it depends on where you're sitting. So give me a moment and I'll come back to you on that. Okay, so what I've taken here is I've given some points. If I was sitting here thinking as a stakeholder concerned largely with local issues, what would I be interested in? Well, I'd be interested in how much direct pollution is coming off the plant, okay, because the direct energy use would have, particulate matter, acid rain issues associated with it. Greenhouse gas emissions is somebody else's problem, okay. Incidents and fines are big because they're polluting my local water sources, okay. Injuries and fatalities, well, they're hitting my community. And yes, I live in Australia, so I'm not that interested. And do I care what awards that have been given? So I've given some weightings pretty highly to my relatively local issues. What happens here? If we just go back to the previous slide of scoring, this one was far and away the winner, okay. As soon as I come and do a weighting exercise, I find that this one is significantly a better performer. Okay? So, as a stakeholder, my viewpoints have changed significantly. Let's go and have a look at somebody who's more concerned with global issues, and this is one that sort of seemed to present to a whole lot of you. I said, okay, as a global person, I don't care about injuries and fatalities in a developing nation, but what I am concerned about is global warming. A little bit about energy because it's a non-renewable resource. Not that plussed about that. And okay, I have a bit of a social conscience, so I want to see what happens. I want to see that they've got a policy in place, and I, donate to World Vision, and so to deal with my social conscience. And there we have company 3 coming back into the lead. Okay, so your weighting has an impact on what's going on there. However, and this comes nicely onto Natasha's point, thank you, is what do these weightings mean? And there's a lot of abuse given to weightings, which is problematic, in that people express strong preferences, with the exception of you, on issues without actually looking at the decisions that they're involved in or the alternatives that they're busy considering. Okay. Now I want to have a look at this in terms of sort of a more structured decision approach, in that let's have a look at what the actual scores of those companies were. And these are numbers I've made up, so don't go and quote me on this. But if we're going to have a look, let's say if we're going to have a look at these performance scores, and we actually go through them and we say, okay, let's look at the amount of energy that's used per kilogram of product A. There's a range of about 20 on 450 in there. So that's, my on-the-spot maths is terrible. It's 1 over 20. It's about 5%, yeah? So in fact, between our 3 companies, there's only a 5% variability between our 3 companies. Our greenhouse gases are huge. The one goes from 2,000 all the way down to 5 tons of greenhouse gas per product A. Okay? Producing the same product, but there's a, not even going to try, huge difference between the amounts of greenhouse gases that are emitted. We've got a number of fines here. Look at this company's performance in terms of injuries and fatalities. These people have no injuries and fatalities. These have 10, and these ones have had 500 injuries and fatalities over the year. All have a policy on child labour, and the one has some awards. Now, going back to your weighting of your different of that list which I gave you before, do you feel you would look at that differently? Anybody feel they would look differently? No. What do you reckon, Claire? Yes.
There's just some things there that just write off companies completely.
Yeah, that's correct. So we'd have a situation where we'd write off companies completely, okay? Because we just wouldn't go with somebody who has 500 injuries or fatalities, regardless of. But the other thing we might do is we might put more emphasis on those criteria where there's a bigger performance gap between the companies. So we might actually write off some criteria which we don't want to consider. And at this point, although I was concerned previously about direct energy use, chances are good at this point I'm going to say, you know what, they all have a similar direct energy use. I'm not going to give a strong weighting to that. if all I'm looking at, and I've chosen policies on child labour, let me try that again, chosen policies on child labour as an issue, but they've all got a policy on child labour, so therefore I won't put as much weighting onto that particular criterion as I might have done without seeing those sets of information. Okay.
The temptation
So
is really just to give 100% weighting to the greenhouse gas emissions in company one, and 100% weighting to the injuries and fatality. You lose all of the weighting.
Well,
And
what you're doing is you're trying to compare across companies, so you need to give. So I think if I can maybe phrase that differently, what your temptation would be to do in that case is 50% on greenhouse gas and 50% on fatalities, because in fact those are the only two issues which are going to make you choose between those companies. Okay, so hopefully I've given you a bit of a sense of the fact that that weighting in the absence of actually knowing your performance indication, your actual performance, is a bit of a wasted exercise, because you actually want to compare things in context of what they're actually doing. Yeah, and so that's what that's what I would have gone with as well. May not be convinced, but that's fine. Okay. That pretty much brings us to the end of what I've got time to cover with you today. I think in summary, I hope to have given you a bit of a taste of giving some thought to what people report, why they should be reporting, how they should be reporting, and the extreme limitations of the existing reporting frameworks. And I mean, it's been a workshop, so I haven't given you that. I hope I've facilitated that. And I also hope I've given you a bit of a sense of how important thinking about how you make decisions is, without just proceeding with them sort of blindly ahead with that. Anybody got any questions or comments or anything? Good. Well, thank you all for coming along. I really enjoyed